Future Sense is a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia at bayfm.org. Hosted by Nick Jeans and well-known international futurist Steve McDonald, Future Sense provides a fresh, deep analysis of global trends and emergent technologies. How can we identify the layers of growth, personally, socially, and globally? What are the signs missed, the truths being denied? Science, history, politics, psychology, ancient civilizations, alien contact, the new psychedelic revolution, cryptocurrency and other disruptive and distributed technologies, and much more. This is Future Sense.
So there's a bit in the news now, having just spoken about that pendulum dynamic between me and we, and of course the extreme of one leads to the other. And as we reach the end of this me-oriented era, it's creating an incredible amount of loneliness, and this is a factor of the social systems and the way that we designed them during the me-oriented era, and also the kind of technology that were designed. And ironically, any of these systems, when they first emerge as a new way of being human, they solve the problems, the most immediate problems that we're facing, but then over time they eventually create new problems as a result of the pendulum swinging too far in one direction. And so the social systems and the technology that we've created during the scientific industrial era has created a world of separation of individuality, and hence is leading to loneliness, which is one of the transition factors. And it's in the news.
It's in the news. It's everywhere in the news, actually, at the moment. There's quite a lot of articles from the ABC about this, and particularly the Australia Talks study, which has been done recently, which articulates a lot of, and we filled this out. Oh, I did. Did you? I think you finished it.
I didn't fill it out.
I did fill it out, and you might have come across that. And as I said to you off air before, I mean, as an ABC survey, clearly it's probably weighted towards ABC listeners because that's who's going to listen and that's who's going to do it. So it's probably not indicative totally of Australia's situation, but it does articulate a lot of this social isolation we're talking about here, and loneliness and mental health issues generally speaking in the Australian population.
That's right. And for people who might be listening internationally and aren't familiar with our ABC here, it's actually a government-funded news agency which enjoys an interesting amount of independence, and has historically, although that's coming under more and more pressure these days. And so it has tended to be rather edgy and particularly sort of leaning towards that communal perspective, which has caused it to be criticised over time as being left-wing and those sorts of things politically. But it's what we are seeing is that I think it's attracting a progressive audience at the moment, and so this survey is probably a good sample of that progressive element of Australian society.
Well, of the 54,000 Australians surveyed by the ABC, or who answered this survey, 44% of 18 to 24-year-olds rated their mental health as average or poor. That's a pretty extraordinary statistic, isn't it?
It is. It is, and again, it's a result of growing up in a world that's very, very complex, and the complexity is calling for a more capable operating system. So the natural adaptation of human consciousness is causing these young people to move quite quickly through the value systems, quicker than you and I would have, when we were growing up, Nick. Simply because we naturally, it's kind of like water finds its own level. So wherever the complexity level is in society, we'll naturally adapt to meet that. And so when we were younger than we are now and growing up, society was less complex, and we didn't need to move through the value systems as quickly or through as many value systems. But kids these days are, so they're moving quite quickly. And I mean, that there is a really interesting discussion. There's quite a rabbit hole that you could go down there, because what it means is that for older generations now, we spent more time growing through these earlier value systems, so more time in our wild teenage kind of behaviour, more time in the sort of stable layer 4 where we've found a cause, and we're
speak for yourself,
and we're being more disciplined, to pursue our aims in life and those sorts of things. But kids these days are moving more quickly through these.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it.
It is, yeah.
So what you're saying there too is, as they grow up, assuming that young people find a way through the mental mental health issues, they will have a lot more capacity available to them as they grow older because they've already dealt with some of these issues, and that capacity will enable them to find a way to integrate all that we're talking about here into the new paradigm as it emerges.
Yeah, and it's hard for older generations to look at this because they see the kids kind of missing out on some of the, discipline's a good thing, like, because we had to spend more time going through that fourth value system because it was still stronger and more prevalent in society than it is now. And when older generations look at the young kids, they see that they're not needing to be disciplined, and they see that as something missing from their education and their growth and adaptation. But it's simply because they're having to move through to more capable value sets which operate in different ways.
I guess social media has an impact here because it's very hard to see a sort of disciplinarian structure within social media. It's exactly the opposite, really.
Well, that's
the idea of it. It hasn't turned out to be exactly that, but as we move forward.
It's a platform for the expression of these more evolved values. However, it's a platform that's been designed by the previous value system, so it's inherently disconnecting because it gives you the impression that you're connecting with other people, but you're actually not. You're communicating with them remotely, but there's an absolute absence of connection, and that absence of connection is, of course, key to the feeling of loneliness and the mental health issues surrounding that. And I think this is something that mainstream society, and particularly our health systems, hasn't quite recognised yet, is that our technology is actually causing these mental health issues because of its disconnective nature. And interestingly, when I was in Zurich last year giving a talk, there was a presentation there by a Swiss organisation called the Reconnect Foundation. And I'll tweet their website after the show, reconnect-foundation.org. And they have clearly recognised this absence of connection as being the root cause of mental illness. And one of their sort of slogans is reconnecting to self, others and nature, particularly to address depression.
Yeah. Just on what we're talking about here, social isolation and loneliness, there is a report from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, which is an Australian government institution. This is only from September this year, so it's very current.
Yeah.
And it talks about social media here. The relationship between social media and loneliness is complex and depends on the individual and their life circumstances. That's important, simple but important. Users of social media experiencing loneliness have reported increased use of social media to communicate with family and friends, while at the same time reporting fewer online friends and being less likely to consider these as real friends than users who are not experiencing loneliness. Others have argued that online socializing can increase levels of loneliness, as these relationships are generally fragile and shallow. The number of online friends appears less important than the quality and strength of the relationships.
Yeah. I think that's very good, and hopefully our people who are working in the mental health across society are starting to wake up to this factor and include it in their considerations.
Yeah.
From that same article that you were just quoting, it points out that loneliness is a killer. And I'm going to quote from the article here. An influential meta-analysis which collated and analysed the results of nearly 150 studies underlines the impact on health of loneliness, or more specifically lack of social integration and social support. It found loneliness increases the risk of death more than such things as poor diet, obesity, alcohol consumption and lack of exercise, and that it is as harmful as heavy smoking.
It's fascinating too. We're talking about it right now, but I think this is actually arising in the general consciousness, in the zeitgeist, this notion of loneliness and disconnection. I mean, that's probably even a better word to use in terms of the way we're talking, isn't it?
Yeah.
That sort of, and that sense and that feeling that we're looking for connection. Social media has arisen to try and fulfill that, but has certainly left a lot of people almost worse off than better off. But so there's all those forces going on.
It has, and it's just another aspect of the evolutionary tension. And we talk about this elastic band idea of like pulling an elastic band back on a slingshot to give ourselves momentum in the opposite direction. And so this individuality that's causing us to feel lonely is part of that tension, which is going to drive us to move back towards recreating community again.
Yeah. Just by the way, folks, if any of the things we're talking about today disturb you in some way, you should know the numbers to call, and I'll just give you the Lifeline number, 13 11 14. There are many other numbers like Kids Helpline, Men's Line Australia, Suicide Callback Service, Beyond Blue, and Headspace. All of those numbers are quite easy to find, but Lifeline is a good first port of call, 13 11 14. We know these things can be triggering to talk about at times.
That's right. And if you'd like to give Nick a call, his number is... Oh, no, I better not give that out. You're far better recalling those other people anyway. They know what they're doing.
Thank you. Lovely. I'll see you afterwards. I will see you afterwards.
Right.
We do have one quick other text in here, which is kind of interesting too, we're talking about councils of elders. From my own divorce hell and others I know of, it's clear a community council of wise elders is needed. Such a shame we don't have one already. So much needless suffering because of this lack. Perhaps Future Sense can help Byron create one and lead the way. So here's my phone number. No.
We would love to do that, actually.
We would love to do that. Seriously.
We're waiting for a call.
We're waiting for a call. That's right. Yes, stay tuned to this very channel for information about these very things in the future, not too distant, hopefully.
Or we may just start a grassroots movement.
We might, indeed.
Maybe we already have.
You're tuned to Future Sense with Nick Jeans and Steve McDonald. Engage, emerge, activate, and spiral up.
We have got a couple of calls coming, and thanks for that. And Mahani, who is one of our Italian show presenters at times, she said, look, it's okay to go to a service like Lifeline, of course, but what they do in Italy is reach out and talk to a friend before they do that as a preventative measure. That's what they do in Italy. And it's a good point, because obviously a lot of what we're talking about is certainly, or aspects of it, culturally situated.
And absolutely, yeah. There are regions on the planet that tend to have what seems to be a natural bias at this time in history anyway towards either communal or individual value systems, and certainly in the Italian community there is a very, very strong communal dynamic there, and so this is another way how at this time in history we can look to what's actually happening around us in different communities and different places and get answers to the problems.
Yes. It's a two-sided thing. Even this, I'm thinking now, because you in a strong family, society or culture, that's a very great resource. But also there's probably often a tendency then to isolate from other members of society in other countries, other minorities and other expressions of culture. Yeah. So it's a two-sided thing there.
It is, and it's interesting just to reflect on that official message that you read out, which I guess is part of the station's kind of standard procedure at the moment, and how individually oriented it is. It's really come out of the scientific industrial mind, where if you've got a problem, you go and see a specialist, right? The solution is not community, the solution is an individual thing. And our healthcare and medicine in general, and it really right across society, if you look at every profession in the scientific industrial era, it's been about narrowing the focus and specialising and deepening the knowledge within a narrow area. And that is a very individuating dynamic. And so, if you've got a problem here, then you go and see one of these specialists who knows everything there is to know about that narrow little area.
Although I would contest that slightly in terms of things like Lifeline, because most of those people are volunteers, or they all are volunteers, and they are trained in basic sort of structure of how to talk to people, but really what people are seeking is connection when they call up. They're seeking a community right there, and that's what they're offered someone.
I'm not criticising those services, I'm sure, and I know that they provide an excellent service, but I'm just looking at the design, the overall design of the social solution here, rather than actually connecting with the people around you. It's go and talk to a specialist, which is an old school angle, really.
Now, in this Australia Talks project that we've mentioned by the ABC, this survey that you may have done, 54,000 people around Australia did it, and they do talk about the groups that they found who do feel lonely. The most striking finding from the Australia Talks national survey is simply how pervasive loneliness is in Australia today. Indeed, only half, 54% of participants reported rarely or never feeling lonely, so 46% said often or sometimes. The survey also finds loneliness as a particular challenge for certain sections of the community, and 4 of those stand out. The first one's an obvious one. Young people we've already addressed today, and we've already looked at today.
Yeah. And it's not just our social media technology which is driving this either. It's older technologies like radio, for example, and television, which have you sitting in a room listening to an electrical device for entertainment rather than interacting with other people.
Interesting statistic on radio I read recently is that most people now listen to radio by themselves, usually in the car.
Yeah.
You may have other people in the car too, but often it's by yourself. Whereas in the olden days, the old days of the wireless, people would sit around the wireless and it would be an event to tune into the 7 o'clock news or 8 o'clock, radio play or whatever it might be. So it was a communal activity, even though you were sort of focused on the media.
Yeah, I do remember earlier this year coming across a news article from back in the days when wireless was just coming out, and somebody had written an article about how it's going to ruin the kids, this technology.
Prescient.
It's made me laugh. Yeah.
So young people, obviously the first batch of people who are identified in this survey has been particularly subject to feelings of loneliness. Among people aged 18 to 24, only a third rarely or never feel lonely. More than a quarter said that they felt lonely frequently or always. That's a quarter. And this contrasts sharply with the situation for older people, as I already mentioned earlier in the show today. So, and that image of a lonely person is typically someone of advanced years, suggests that we do need to update our data, and that's notwithstanding, of course, the Royal Commission into aged care, which is another bloody thing too.
Yeah.
Just to mention that there.
Yeah. And so you were talking about the different groups who reported feeling lonely, young people, inner city dwellers.
Inner city dwellers.
Which is interesting. And maybe, the whole structure of our society and the way that we've structured cities and those sorts of things, it's all come from this individually oriented mindset. One Nation voters is an interesting one. Yeah. And for those of you who are listening to the podcast somewhere else in the world, One Nation is a political party here in Australia, which typically expresses very, very simplistic values, mostly individually oriented values, which I would associate with layer 3, which is that red, teenage-like, rebellious, I'll do whatever I want to do and I'll say what I want to say kind of messages.
But based in a sort of conservative, if you will, right-wing politics, and yet a bit different to that too. It's not just political.
It's regressive and it's very much about going back to the way things used to be. But typically you get that I'll say what I want to say. And, I drove past a billboard, I think I even mentioned it on air, with Pauline Hanson, the leader of the party, and a big slogan, her face and a slogan that said, I say what you'd like to say, but aren't too scared to say it, that kind of thing. And so I'm not surprised that loneliness is reported by those folks, because it is generally an individually oriented perspective of wanting to satisfy yourself.
And probably that statement on that billboard for her and for those people who follow her is actually very accurate.
Yeah.
In fact.
Well, it is, of course. Of course it's accurate. Yeah.
So it resonates.
Yeah. And then the fourth category that they mentioned in this article was people on low incomes.
Yeah.
And maybe, I guess that, is related to the fact that it costs money to do things in modern society. And again, this is the way that we've structured our social systems. And if you don't have the money, then it's hard to get out and socialise, perhaps.
It does look to some solutions, which we're going to look at a few of those in the last half hour or so.
Yeah.
Just to finish the article regarding that, though, for us, for the survey people, a large part of the answer lies in efforts to rebuild group-based social connections, which is exactly what, Steve, we've been talking about here in terms of the emerging green or sixth layer. Those social connections that are eroded by the tyrannies of modern life, which is the previous and dominant paradigm right now, the orange layer. And this is a world where all types of community, families, neighbourhoods, churches, political parties, trade unions and even stable work groups are constantly under threat. So let's get talking, as they say in this article. And that's interesting. Those older types of communities are breaking down.
Yeah, and it speaks to the general need for us to rebuild community, local community, and rebuild it in a way that makes it very resilient to to all of the changes that are going to be coming over the next decade or two. And it's not just about loneliness and the physical interaction of community, but it's about also sharing local resources. It's about being resourceful and locally resilient, so that when these systems that have been designed and constructed by the old paradigm progress further into failure, and they're already failing to some extent, then we can fall back on our local community and local resources in hard times. And there's a lot of evidence mounting now that we are going to face many, many different challenges, including things like potentially food shortages, energy supply disruptions, those sorts of things over the next 10 to 15 years.
I think there's been a report just the last couple of days about the corn harvest in the US this year. I have to pull that up.
That's right. We've been talking about that on previous shows, from the extreme weather over last winter in North America, which was extreme cold and extreme wet, which shortened the cropping season there, and also delayed planting in the present summer, which is just finishing now, which ended up being a short summer. So there's been a shorter growing season, and now already, even though it's officially not quite summertime yet, they're getting record snowfalls and disruptions to agriculture in North America once again, and similar things have been happening in Europe and Russia to a different extent. And so this is likely to continue, looking at the long-term patterns, and as we get one difficult cropping season after another, then it's going to mount into eventually quite significant food shortages, we expect. And it's not just us. There are scientists who are studying this who are saying the same thing.
Yes, the corn situation, the most delayed US corn harvest on record, is resulting in chaos for traditional commodity trade routes. That's interesting there, right? Even just that bit. Yep. Corn usually is harvested in the Midwest before it is sent south to be exported. But because farmers in the East, hurt by a springtime deluge, are holding back on supplies in hope of higher prices, the commodities price has been pushed higher than the futures market in the East, while it remains lower than the futures market in the West. If you understand economics, there you go. It's a phenomenon known as basis arbitrage. So all of these systems are under stress, or breaking, or compromised here and there. Sometimes they'll work and sometimes they fall apart, clearly.
That's right. And we're going through a whole of system change at the moment. So it's not just human consciousness that's shifting. The change in human consciousness is simply an adaptive aspect of a much, much larger change, which in fact involves our whole solar system, if you really want to step back and look at it from that perspective. And it's the stresses, the evolutionary tension is showing up in different ways around the world, particularly, as we've just mentioned, in North America. It's been cold winters and a lot of water from the snow melt at the end of winter and excess rainfall. But here in Australia, we're experiencing the opposite with drought, and that looks like it will actually get worse here. So it's not uniform, around the world. It's showing up in different ways. Yeah.
Yes, and that uncertainty across the board everywhere is, I think, really important. We probably can't at all make a carte blanche generalisation about directions that we should go in on the planet this way or that to deal with some of these problems, because they're going to express themselves in different ways at different times in different places.
And that speaks to the need to rebuild local communities and create local resistance based on your local conditions.
Indeed.
Yeah.
You're tuned to Future Sense here with Steve McDonald and Nick Jeans through till 11 o'clock. It's 10:32, and our podcasts can be found from most podcast platforms like iTunes and others, but also through our website, futuresense.it. It's just a one-page website at the moment. It's going to be a bit more extensive fairly soon, but that's a portal to everything. And those edited podcasts come in two parts of about half an hour each of the content, missing our sponsorship announcements and unfortunately the music, which is generally quite good. I think the music we play here too.
For all of you out there, strangers in a strange land, you're grokking Future Sense here on Bay FM.
You are still tuned to Future Sense with Steve McDonald and myself, Nick Jeans, and we're talking about mental health, loneliness, and so forth here on the planet. And
that's right, and loneliness being a transition factor, very much related to this value shift that's going on from an old individually oriented paradigm into a new communally oriented paradigm. And one of the really important aspects of that is captured in the research of Claire W. Graves, and I just want to read something from his research at the moment, and it's about the central driver that is associated with this new value system that's emerging. So the new humanistic, relativistic, network-centric value system that's emerging in an evolutionary dynamic to replace the old scientific, industrial, military, corporate way of being human. And Claire Graves writes, the need to belong, to affiliate oneself rather than go it alone becomes central during this transition. This affiliative need, which is our third form of belonging need, now organises our existence. As it does, the adjustment of the organism to the environment process becomes dominant again and gives rise to a new theme for existence. And that theme is sacrifice some now so others can have too. And so there Graves is talking about the fact that we're moving from personal success being our central driver for everything in life, which has been the case with the old paradigm, to now affiliation, in other words, deep human connection becoming our central driver. And because that need is becoming stronger, then you can see why loneliness is becoming such an important issue, even to the point of being life-threatening for people, because it is the central need that's developing in this new value system.
I also thought along those lines earlier today that because this has happened, because this richness, this deepening, this complexity of our emotional response to life on Earth now, it's actually giving us enabling the skills we need to navigate that very territory somehow, because we actually have to now, and we were able to, potentially most of us or many of us able to actually do that, but there will be those who find it very difficult, of course. A couple of texts have come in, thanks. Let's see, there's actually quite a lot of texts here. Thanks for this one quickly. Hi guys, the beach is the best place to relieve loneliness. It's where the energies of the sky, the sea and the land meet. Beautiful place. Absolutely agree with that. Someone else has written in talking about us creating a bit of a Sunday a month to start sort of helping to heal the problems between men and women in particular, much cheaper than lawyers. That's an idea, and we are actually moving towards something like that as we go forward.
We are, yeah. And maybe it's a good time just to talk briefly about this. So we don't talk about this much on the show, but Nick is working with me in an organisation that we've created called the RD Mesh Foundation, and the active part of that is the Agency for Advanced Development of Integrative Intelligence. So this is a non-profit organisation that we've created. It's a registered charity here in Australia, the RD Mesh Foundation. And basically this organisation has been created to support the global paradigm shift as best we can. And there are three aspects to it. It's quite, I guess it's been coming for a long time, but it's really only started to take shape and flower in the last year or so, and it's of course being built off the work that I've done in change management over the years. But the three different aspects of the RD Mesh Foundation and its agency RD are firstly human consciousness and technologies to accelerate human development, so technologies that help us move more quickly through these value systems to take us more quickly to a place of greater coping capacity on a large scale. And the second aspect is an education and communication aspect called Future Sense, which you're listening to right now.
Yes.
And we have plans to expand that into a documentary series, working closely with our other team member, who is the remarkable filmmaker Mitch Schultz, currently in Texas, but soon to be back here in Australia. And Mitch is coming back here in January, and we're going to start putting together this documentary series, which really is going to be about the stuff that we talk about on the radio show and podcast, but also going to places around the world where people are doing things according to the new paradigm in leading edge ways, looking at leading edge ways of being human, leading edge technology, those sorts of things. And then the third aspect of our activity through RD is plans for a digital ecosystem. So basically a web-based platform, which will be a place where people can go, regardless of where they are around the world, to connect with other people who are actively building the new paradigm. And our plan is to use the latest trust-based, decentralized technology, similar to what's being used for blockchain, so encrypted, decentralized technology, to create this digital ecosystem. And of course, we need some funding to do that. So that's part of our other plan, is to pull together some funding to help us build that digital ecosystem within the next year or two, we hope. So big things on the drawing board there, and of course things happening already. And we're not just talking about this. We do have plans afoot.
We do have plans afoot. A couple of other texts, Melody's written in and talked about many people are stating that our environmental problems are largely caused by overpopulation. Should we introduce a 1 or 2 child policy? What do you think? It's a bit off topic, but I would say no, probably not, but maybe it's going to have to be necessary for a time. I don't know.
Look,
it's a tricky one, that one.
One of the things about fears related to the future is that when people become fearful about the future, those fears are built on what's happening now. And if you think, if we went back to 1930 or 1880 or something and had a conversation about how we're going to feed 7 billion people on the planet, people would have said, you can't do it.
Yeah.
They would have looked around at the farming technology and the supply technology back then, and they would have said, it's impossible, you can't do it. We have to stop the population from getting to 7 billion people at all costs. And of course, we're having the same conversations now. And what we don't realise is that there are new technologies coming. There are new technologies already here that massively multiply our capacity to produce food, that massively reduce our ecological footprint on the planet. The technology's already here. We don't have to worry about overpopulation anytime soon.
And of course, the great futurist Buckminster Fuller proved at one point, quite a long time ago, I think the 70s, if not earlier, that we could feed the planet anyway then with the technology of that time.
Of course, because he was a man way ahead of his time.
He was.
Yeah.
Quickly, another text. I know we're running out of time here. This is kind of important. Hi, guys. Love the show, and more particularly the paradigms of human evolution. Runs alongside Timothy Leary's 8 circuits of the brain. We'll come back to that more. We won't come back to that bit. But this part, I work at Lifeline as crisis support on the phones. The training models primarily focus on connection through listening and other tools such as paraphrasing, reframing, summarising. I have found the model of a great tool for the support worker and the caller. As you guys said, connection is the key, and that comes from feeling heard. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you so much for setting that in. It's really important to understand that these are really, really good services, and we don't want to sound like we're discouraging people from using them. You know, if you need help, give them a call, please.
Riding a motorcycle is also good for the soul, says Nikki Ramone. Hi, Nikki. Thank you.
I agree.
And that's exactly it. I mean, what you love, what your passion is, what turns you on, is what's going to help to heal any sort of mental health issues that you may have, and to understand what those things are. And if you haven't got one, to discover something that you can find your skills with and find your passion with, and do that. More
exactly. We really are reorienting ourselves as a species on the quality of the human experience. There's no doubt about that. We're focusing back in on, okay, we've done all these things, but are we happy?
Exactly.
You're resonating right now on Future Sense with Steve McDonald and Nick Jeans.
And a couple of last texts here. Casper has written in. Anyway, it's about distribution, really, isn't it? The 1% are creaming us all. We need 11 billion souls to sort it.
We need a community effort, that's true.
That's going to get a bit crowded here, but we can deal with it. We can handle it.
Yeah.
Now, before we finish up today, you've just been down this week. Was it this week? Last Tuesday.
Yes.
Down to Canberra to visit, on invitation, the Governor-General.
I did.
We did mention it on air.
Yeah. I just wanted to give it a report. Thanks for that.
Who was your
finish the show today? So,
commanding officer when you were in the Army?
That's right. So His Excellency General the Honourable David Hurley, I visited, Governor-General of Australia.
And you just called him Dave, didn't you?
No, I didn't actually.
Did you have to bow your head and Your Excellency?
I called him Your Excellency, according with protocol. It was all very formal, you see. And what a spectacular setting at Yarralumla Government House, where I was invited to see him. And the reason that I have a connection with him is that he used to be my boss. Back in the early 90s, he and I were part of an Australian military force sent to Somalia when there was a massive famine on there and a huge international humanitarian response, which involved, I think, military from 37 odd countries. It was a huge delegation from a whole bunch of different countries, 30-something thousand troops. Actually, I think it was less countries, something like 20-something. But anyway, around about 37,000 troops altogether, and. He and I shared the experience of visiting, working in for around about 4 or 5 months. We were there, a society that was experiencing total collapse. So that's a very interesting shared experience to have, to see a society that had one point, developed universities, car factories, Coca-Cola bottling plants, but now basically had descended into being the Wild West with no functional government, no utilities, no power supply, no sanitation, and no law and order. And so that's a very interesting, shared experience. And when I recently toured Australia screening the From Shock to Awe documentary series, which is about treating two US military war veterans suffering from PTSD and depression with psychedelic medicines, through a mutual colleague, the Governor-General heard that I was doing that, and he sent a message back through our mutual colleague inviting me to go visit him and chat about it, which is wonderful. And I have been buttering him up over the years, so I've seen him at military reunions now and again, and every time I see him I always just give him a quick update on research around psychedelic medicines and
also on Claire W. Graves' work too.
I've also been talking to him sporadically about Claire Graves' work as well, and he's remembered those things, and this is why he invited me for a chat. So we had a wonderful talk. It was quite a breakthrough. First of all, because when I walked in and to meet him, he told me that he'd been researching dimethyltryptamine, and I'm pretty sure that's probably the first time the Governor-General of Australia has ever said those words. So I had to.
And geez, you look good in that suit too. I saw the photograph, by the way.
I had to smile. Anyway, we had a good chat about where things are at, and the clincher in the conversation was the fact that the United States Food and Drug Administration has given breakthrough therapy designation to MDMA and to psilocybin, and so on the basis of that. And you can understand, I've got to say, he's one of the most decent people that I've ever met. He's such a decent man and intelligent, and also very mindful and respectful of the enormous responsibility he carries in this job as Governor-General. And so he wasn't about to do anything rash, but what he has offered and is going to do is to give me written introductions to the Department of Veterans Affairs, and so I can go and talk to them about progress in psychedelic medicines, which will be an amazing step forward, just to have a conversation with them, and perhaps work towards support from the government around for research in the future. And he also has asked me to go and brief someone at the Department of Defence. So I've got another trip to Canberra coming up sometime in the future, and he also asked me about my work at the moment. So we got a chance to chat about the fact that I've been speaking as a futurist, talking about the paradigm shift that's underway, and I was delighted to hear that it hadn't escaped his attention that the world is changing in radical ways, and so it's reassuring to know that someone in his position has got their finger on the pulse. Before I said anything, he likened some of the things that are happening in the world at the moment to things that happened during the last transition out of the agricultural era into the scientific
16th century or so, some time ago.
That's right, which is awesome, and who knows, maybe.
And that's a connection with Brendan Nelson, isn't it? Who was the former head of the AMA and a former Liberal Party. I think he was a leader briefly, wasn't he?
I think he might have been too. Yeah, he's. I think he's just finishing up as the leader at the Australian War Memorial.
Yeah, that's right.
At the moment. Yeah. He mentioned that he'd been chatting with Brendan about this, what looks like a paradigm shift going on. So we had a really good short conversation about that, and who knows, that might go somewhere as well.
And you pointed him also to your website and to your talk last year in Switzerland, which folks you can go to at Steve's website, which is emanate, which is EMAN, the number 8.net, emanate.net, and the very front page you'll see the talk that Steve gave in Switzerland last year at the Elevate live conference in Zurich on quantum consciousness. So very good.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll get time to have a look at that.
That's it for us for today. Thank you for joining us here on Future Sense. We'll be back next Monday morning, 9 to 11. Check out the podcast, as we said, futuresense.it, or through other platforms such as iTunes. And that's edited versions are up within a couple of days of the show each week.
That's right. And don't be lonely. Get out there and socialise in real life.
Absolutely. See you soon. Have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
You've been listening to Future Sense, a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia, at bayfm.org. Future Sense is available on iTunes and SoundCloud. The future is here now. It's just not evenly distributed.